Most people don't struggle because they lack talent or even motivation. They struggle because they can't stay consistent. Think about it. How many times have you or someone you know started a new routine with excitement, only to stop a few weeks later? It's not that we don't want to succeed, it's that we don't know how to sustain success. The truth is, consistency is not about willpower. It's about understanding the principles that make it easier to keep going, even when it gets hard. And here's the best part: consistency isn't something only a select few are born with. It's something you can build. Today, I want to share with you 3 powerful secrets that, once you understand them, will help you build unstoppable consistency in anything you do. Whether it's your career, your health, or your personal growth. These aren't tricks or hacks. They're timeless truths about human behavior, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. Because in the end, success doesn't come from what we do once in a while. It comes from what we do consistently. And if you master these 3 secrets, you'll stop starting over and finally create momentum that never stops. Imagine someone who wakes up one morning determined to change their life. They buy new running shoes, plan a strict diet, and commit to a new routine. For the first few days, everything feels exciting. They post about it, they talk about it, and they feel unstoppable. But soon, the motivation fades, life gets in the way, and the new routine becomes harder to keep up with. Eventually, the shoes gather dust, the diet slips away, and they're back where they started. This story is so common because most of us try to rely on willpower alone. We treat consistency like it's some heroic act of discipline, something only the strongest people can maintain. The truth is, consistency has little to do with willpower. It's about designing systems that make progress natural and almost unavoidable. Think of it this way. If you want to drink more water, you don't need to rely on willpower to remind yourself every hour. Instead, you put a water bottle on your desk, one in your bag, and one in your car. Suddenly, the system does the heavy lifting. The decision is already made. Consistency becomes the path of least resistance, not the uphill battle. Most people fail because they try to force behavior against an environment that's set up for failure. But if you shift the environment, you change the outcome. Great athletes, for example, don't leave their performance up to chance. They have training schedules, coaches, nutrition plans, and recovery routines. These are systems. And because of those systems, they don't need to wake up every morning asking themselves if they feel like practicing. The system makes the answer irrelevant. In the same way, when you build systems in your own life, you remove the burden of decision making. You no longer ask, "Should I?" You simply follow the design you've created. The challenge is that many people think consistency requires constant motivation. They wait for that spark of energy to keep them moving forward. But motivation is unreliable. It's an emotional state, and emotions change. Systems don't rely on emotion. They rely on structure. Just like a pilot doesn't rely on their mood to fly a plane, you don't need to rely on motivation to stay consistent. You need a flight plan, a checklist, and a process that guides your actions regardless of how you feel in the moment. Think about the routines you already have in your life that require no thought at all. You brush your teeth every morning, not because you're highly motivated, but because it's part of a system you've followed for years. It doesn't drain your willpower, it doesn't feel like a burden. It just happens. That's the power of systems. They transform difficult tasks into automatic ones, freeing up your energy for bigger challenges. Consistency, then, is really a design problem, not a discipline problem. If your environment supports the behavior you want, you don't have to fight yourself to stay on track. If your calendar has space blocked off, if your reminders are automated, if your tools are within reach, you've already won half the battle before you even begin. The question becomes less about whether you have the strength to push through and more about whether you've created the right system to carry you forward. When people finally understand this shift, from willpower to systems, It's like a light bulb turning on. They realize that the people they admire for being disciplined aren't superhuman. They simply have better systems in place. And once you learn how to build those systems for yourself, consistency stops feeling like a constant uphill climb. It becomes the natural result of a well-designed process. Picture a marathon runner. They don't sprint for 42 kilometers because they know it's impossible to sustain. Instead, they pace themselves, taking steady steps, one after another, until they cross the finish line. Success in life works the same way. It's not about occasional bursts of energy or moments of extreme effort. It's about small actions, done repeatedly, that compound into extraordinary results over time. Yet so many of us make the mistake of chasing intensity. We think working out for 2 hours once a month will transform our health, or pulling an all-nighter will make us successful in our careers. But intensity fades quickly, while consistency, even in the smallest doses, creates a foundation that lasts. Consider the difference between someone who decides to read for 2 hours one day and then stops versus someone who reads for just 10 minutes every day. At first, the person who reads for 2 hours might look more dedicated, but fast forward a year. The one reading 10 minutes daily has consumed entire shelves of books. This is the quiet power of small, consistent actions. They don't demand perfection or extreme effort, but over time, they far surpass what intensity can ever achieve. We live in a world that glorifies big, dramatic gestures. We admire stories of overnight success, crash diets, or radical life changes. But those stories rarely last because they're built on short-term energy rather than long-term sustainability. True progress is boring in the moment. It's the person who goes for a walk every evening, even when it doesn't feel like it matters. It's the person who writes 1 page a day instead of waiting for inspiration to write 50. It's the small, unremarkable choices that seem insignificant today but transform everything tomorrow. The secret is that consistency compounds. Just like money grows with interest, your actions accumulate and build momentum. Missing one intense workout won't ruin you, but skipping a consistent practice over and over erodes trust in yourself. On the other hand, when you show up daily, no matter how small the effort, you prove to yourself that you can be relied upon. That identity shift, from someone who tries to someone who shows up, is more powerful than any single achievement. Think about brushing your teeth again. It takes 2 minutes, twice a day. That's 4 minutes out of 24 hours. Yet those minutes, compounded over years, prevent cavities, protect your smile, and save you from pain and costly dental work. The action feels tiny, almost trivial, but the effect is massive. If you approached your goals the same way, tiny consistent deposits instead of occasional heroic efforts, you'd be amazed at how far you could go. The biggest obstacle is patience. Because the results of small, consistent actions aren't visible right away, most people give up too soon. They expect dramatic change overnight, and when it doesn't come, they quit. But mastery is invisible in the early stages. A musician doesn't sound brilliant after one practice session. A business doesn't grow from one good decision. Results come later, often long after the effort begins. That's why consistency is so powerful. It allows time to work in your favor. It's tempting to believe that doing more in the moment guarantees faster results, but often the opposite is true. By spreading effort consistently, you allow yourself to recover, adapt, and grow stronger. A tree doesn't shoot up overnight. It grows slowly, steadily, with deepening roots and expanding branches. If you forced it to grow faster, it would collapse. Humans are no different. We thrive on steady growth, not on sustainable spurts. When you shift your focus from intensity to consistency, you begin to realize that greatness isn't built in a single moment of effort, but in the thousands of quiet, deliberate actions no one sees. That's where the real transformation happens. One step, one choice, one habit at a time. Think about the word discipline. For many people, it feels heavy, almost like a punishment. It reminds us of rules, restrictions, and forcing ourselves to do things we don't enjoy. That's why so many people struggle to stay disciplined. They see it as fighting against themselves. But discipline becomes something entirely different when it is aligned with your why. When you connect discipline to a deeper purpose, it shifts from being a burden to being an act of devotion. It stops being about what you have to do and becomes about what you choose to do, because it reflects who you are and what you believe in. Imagine an artist working on their craft. From the outside, it may look like discipline. Hours spent practicing, redoing the same lines, and correcting mistakes. But for the artist, it doesn't feel like punishment. It feels like love. They are pulled by a vision of what they want to create, and that vision makes the discipline feel meaningful. The same applies to athletes, entrepreneurs, or anyone striving toward a goal. When their discipline is rooted in a compelling why, they don't see it as sacrifice. They see it as alignment. This is why many people can stay consistent with things that matter deeply to them while struggling to maintain habits they think they should do. If you're forcing yourself to wake up early just because someone told you successful people wake up early, that discipline will feel exhausting and short-lived. But if you're waking up early because you want quiet time to work on your dream project before the world wakes up, suddenly the same discipline feels energizing. It's the same action, but a completely different feeling because it's connected to your why. When discipline is disconnected from purpose, it often becomes fragile. You might be able to push yourself for a few days or weeks, but eventually resistance builds and excuses creep in. You'll ask yourself, why am I even doing this? Without a good answer, the discipline collapses. But when your why is clear, that question fuels you instead of stopping you. Every act of discipline becomes an expression of what matters most to you. Take someone training for a triathlon. On cold mornings, when they have to dive into icy water or cycle against strong winds, it would be easy to quit if their only reason was to exercise more. But if their why is to prove to themselves they can overcome limits, or to honor someone they love, the discipline becomes almost sacred. The pain, the repetition, the sacrifice, it all takes on meaning. The why turns discipline from punishment into purpose. This principle also applies to everyday life. If you want to save money, but your only reason is that you should, every purchase will feel like a battle of willpower. But if your why is to create a better future for your family, or to gain the freedom to travel, saving money becomes empowering. The discipline to say no in the moment feels like saying yes to something bigger. The most successful people in any field aren't necessarily the most disciplined by nature. They are simply the ones who have connected their discipline to something that matters so much that not showing up feels like a betrayal of themselves. Their consistency is not forced, it's fueled. This is why discipline aligned with your why lasts, while discipline based only on rules eventually breaks down. When you begin to link your daily habits, routines, and actions to your deeper purpose, discipline transforms. It stops being about gritting your teeth through hard tasks and starts being about honoring your values, your vision, and your identity. It becomes less about punishment and more about passion. In that state, discipline is no longer the enemy. It becomes your ally, guiding you toward the life you actually want to live. There are days when you wake up inspired, full of energy, ready to conquer the world. And then there are days when even the smallest task feels heavy, when the enthusiasm is gone, and you wonder why you started in the first place. This is the trap so many fall into, relying on motivation as the engine for progress. Motivation is wonderful when it's there, but it is unpredictable, fleeting, and dependent on how we feel in the moment. If we build our consistency on the shaky ground of motivation, our progress will rise and fall with our moods. What truly sustains momentum over the long run is clarity of purpose. When you know why you're doing something, you can keep moving forward even when the spark of motivation is gone. Think of a parent caring for a newborn. They don't get up in the middle of the night because they feel motivated. They do it because they are deeply connected to their purpose. the love and responsibility for their child. The why is so strong that the how, no matter how exhausting, becomes bearable. The same principle applies to any goal worth pursuing. When you are crystal clear on your purpose, you stop depending on motivation and start depending on meaning. Purpose creates a compass. It points you in a direction when distractions and doubts threaten to pull you off course. Without purpose, you might start a new project, a new habit, or a new routine with energy, but eventually the obstacles will wear you down. With purpose, however, you see obstacles differently. They are no longer signs that you should stop, but reminders that the journey is supposed to be challenging, because what you're striving for matters deeply. Clarity of purpose also reduces the mental friction of decision making. If your why is strong enough, the question of whether to continue is already answered. Imagine training for a marathon, not because you want to run, but because you're raising money for a cause that saved a loved one's life. On days you don't feel like running, you don't ask, "Do I want to train today?" Instead, you ask, "Am I still committed to this purpose?" And the answer is always yes. The miles become a byproduct of meaning, not motivation. Purpose also fuels resilience. People with a clear why endure hardships others cannot. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, famously wrote that those who had a reason to live could endure almost anyhow. When your purpose is defined, setbacks don't destroy you. They refine you. They become part of the journey, not the end of it. This is why some people quit after the first failure, while others rise stronger each time. They are anchored to something bigger than the task itself. And the beautiful thing about purpose is that it doesn't have to be grand or world-changing. It simply has to matter to you. Maybe your purpose for getting healthier is to have the energy to play with your kids. Maybe your purpose for building a business is to create freedom for your family. Maybe your purpose for learning a new skill is to prove to yourself that growth never stops. These personal anchors are far more powerful than the fleeting rush of motivation, because they give your actions meaning every single day. When you align your consistency with your purpose, the journey becomes less about forcing yourself to show up and more about choosing to honor what matters to you. The energy may not always be there. The excitement may fade. But when the reason is clear, you find strength you didn't know you had. Motivation asks, "Do I feel like it today?" Purpose says, "This is who I am, and this is what I stand for." That difference is what sustains momentum when everything else tries to slow you down. Think about the word discipline. For many people, it feels heavy, almost like a punishment. It reminds us of rules, restrictions, and forcing ourselves to do things we don't enjoy. That's why so many people struggle to stay disciplined. They see it as fighting against themselves. But discipline becomes something entirely different when it is aligned with your why. When you connect discipline to a deeper purpose, it shifts from being a burden to being an act of devotion. It stops being about what you have to do and becomes about what you choose to do, because it reflects who you are and what you believe in. Imagine an artist working on their craft. From the outside, it may look like discipline, hours spent practicing, redoing the same lines, and correcting mistakes. But for the artist, it doesn't feel like punishment. It feels like love. They are pulled by a vision of what they want to create, and that vision makes the discipline feel meaningful. The same applies to athletes, entrepreneurs, or anyone striving toward a goal. When their discipline is rooted in a compelling why, they don't see it as sacrifice. They see it as alignment. This is why many people can stay consistent with things that matter deeply to them while struggling to maintain habits they think they should do. If you're forcing yourself to wake up early just because someone told you successful people wake up early, that discipline will feel exhausting and short-lived. But if you're waking up early because you want quiet time to work on your dream project before the world wakes up, suddenly the same discipline feels energizing. It's the same action, but a completely different feeling because it's connected to your why. When discipline is disconnected from purpose, it often becomes fragile. You might be able to push yourself for a few days or weeks, but eventually resistance builds and excuses creep in. You'll ask yourself, why am I even doing this? Without a good answer, the discipline collapses. But when your why is clear, that question fuels you instead of stopping you. Every act of discipline becomes an expression of what matters most to you. Take someone training for a triathlon. On cold mornings, when they have to dive into icy water or cycle against strong winds, it would be easy to quit if their only reason was to exercise more. But if their why is to prove to themselves they can overcome limits, or to honor someone they love, the discipline becomes almost sacred. The pain, the repetition, the sacrifice, it all takes on meaning. The why turns discipline from punishment into purpose. This principle also applies to everyday life. If you want to save money, but your only reason is that you should, every purchase will feel like a battle of willpower. But if your why is to create a better future for your family or to gain the freedom to travel, saving money becomes empowering. The discipline to say no in the moment feels like saying yes to something bigger. The most successful people in any field aren't necessarily the most disciplined by nature. They are simply the ones who have connected their discipline to something that matters so much that not showing up feels like a betrayal of themselves. Their consistency is not forced, it's fueled. This is why discipline aligned with your why lasts, while discipline based only on rules eventually breaks down. When you begin to link your daily habits, routines, and actions to your deeper purpose, discipline transforms. It stops being about gritting your teeth through hard tasks and starts being about honoring your values, your vision, and your identity. It becomes less about punishment and more about passion. In that state, discipline is no longer the enemy. It becomes your ally, guiding you toward the life you actually want to live. Every action we take leaves a subtle mark, not just on the results we see in the outside world, but on the way we see ourselves. Habits over time do more than shape routines, they shape identity. This is why the person who smokes doesn't just smoke, they begin to see themselves as a smoker. The person who runs every day doesn't just run, they begin to see themselves as a runner. Identity follows action, and the more often we repeat an action, the stronger that identity becomes. What's fascinating is that once identity takes root, it becomes the fuel for consistency. Because humans are wired to act in alignment with who they believe they are. Think about it. If you're trying to quit smoking, but you still think of yourself as a smoker, every cigarette you refuse feels like a battle. You're fighting against your own identity. But if you start to see yourself as a non-smoker, the dynamic changes. Saying no is no longer resisting. It's simply living in alignment with who you are. The same is true for any habit, whether it's eating healthy, exercising, writing, or building a business. The actions we repeat create an identity, and once that identity is strong, it creates the consistency we often struggle to maintain. This is why focusing only on outcomes can be dangerous. If your only goal is to lose 10 pounds, you might work hard until you reach that number, but what happens after? Without a new identity, you slip back into old patterns, and the weight returns. But if your focus shifts from, I want to lose weight, to, I am the kind of person who takes care of their health, then the consistency continues beyond the goal. You no longer need to chase results because your identity naturally drives the actions that create them. Athletes know this well. A professional doesn't just train because they want to win a game. They train because that's who they are. A writer doesn't sit down to write only when inspiration strikes. They write because they see themselves as a writer. Identity takes the struggle out of consistency because it reframes the behavior from something you do into something you are. And when behavior aligns with identity, momentum becomes much easier to sustain. The beauty of this principle is that identity can be intentionally shaped. You don't have to wait for years of repetition before adopting a new identity. It starts with a choice, and is reinforced through small actions. If you want to become a reader, start by reading 1 page a day. Each time you do, you cast a vote for the identity of, I am a reader. If you want to become fit, every workout is a vote for, I am an athlete. The more votes you cast, the stronger the identity becomes, until eventually it feels natural, even automatic. The real challenge for most people is that they try to build habits in conflict with their current identity. They say, I'm not a morning person, but I'll try to wake up early. Or, I'm terrible with money, but I'll try to save. That language reinforces the old identity, making consistency an uphill battle. A more powerful shift is to start speaking and acting from the identity you want to embody. Instead of, I'm trying to quit smoking, say, I don't smoke. Instead of, I'm trying to eat healthy, say, I eat foods that fuel my body. These small shifts in language reframe who you are, and the behavior follows. Consistency is never just about the habit, it's about who the habit turns you into. And once your identity begins to shift, the effort feels lighter because every action reinforces who you already believe yourself to be. In this way, habits create identity, and identity becomes the invisible engine that drives long-term consistency. We live in a world that often celebrates speed. Fast results, quick wins, instant gratification. These are the measures by which so many people judge progress. But true growth, the kind that lasts and transforms lives, isn't measured by how fast you can get there. It's measured by endurance, by your ability to keep going long after the excitement has worn off. Progress is not about sprinting to the finish line. It's about having the stamina to stay in the race when others drop out. Think about a bamboo tree. For years after being planted, nothing seems to happen. You water it, care for it, nurture it, and yet it doesn't break through the soil. Most people would give up, believing their effort was wasted. But then, almost suddenly, in a matter of weeks, the bamboo shoots up, growing taller than almost any other plant. Was the growth really sudden? No. It was the result of years of unseen endurance, roots building strength beneath the surface. That is how progress works. What you see on the outside often comes much later than the effort invested on the inside. The same truth applies in careers, health, relationships, and personal growth. It's easy to start strong, but what defines you is your ability to keep showing up when results aren't visible yet. Endurance builds resilience, and resilience builds outcomes. A writer who produces 1 page a day may not look impressive in the beginning, but after a year, they've written a book. A runner who jogs slowly but consistently ends up covering more distance than the one who sprints for a week and quits. Endurance is quiet, but it's powerful. What makes endurance difficult is the temptation to measure success by speed. We compare ourselves to others who got promoted faster, who lost weight quicker, who built success overnight. That comparison kills endurance because it shifts focus from staying the course to chasing shortcuts. And shortcuts rarely lead to meaningful progress. Endurance teaches patience. It teaches you that the process is where growth happens, and the destination is just a byproduct of sticking with it long enough. Endurance also changes your relationship with failure. When you're sprinting, failure feels like the end. You fall once, and you're out of the race. But when your mindset is rooted in endurance, failure becomes part of the journey. It's just another mile marker, another test of your ability to keep going. Think about Thomas Edison, who famously said he didn't fail thousands of times when inventing the light bulb. He simply discovered thousands of ways that didn't work. His endurance, not his speed, gave the world one of its greatest inventions. There's also a psychological shift that happens when you embrace endurance over speed. You stop obsessing over outcomes and begin valuing the act of showing up. Every day becomes a victory because you're still in the game. That shift reduces the pressure because you're no longer chasing instant results. You're investing in a process that compounds over time. It's the difference between a crash diet and a lifestyle change, between a get rich, quick scheme and a sustainable business, between a short burst of passion and a lifelong pursuit of purpose. Endurance doesn't mean moving slowly forever. It means moving steadily enough that you don't burn out. It means creating a rhythm that allows you to persist, to recover, and to continue. And the irony is, those who focus on endurance often end up achieving more than those who chase speed, because they're still moving long after the sprinters have stopped. Progress is rarely glamorous in the moment. It's often repetitive, quiet, and unnoticed by others. But the ones who endure, who keep watering their bamboo trees, who keep writing their pages, who keep taking the small steps, are the ones who eventually break through in ways that look sudden to the outside world. They know the truth. Real progress is not about how fast you start, but how long you're willing to keep going.